Power Apps and Power Automate are actually components within the Microsoft Power Platform ecosystem. So starting at the left-hand side there, we have Power BI, which would enable you to create dashboards, reports, etc., and leverage business analytics. Next, we have Power Apps, which we'll go through today. And Power Apps would really help you to develop the apps to support your business needs. Next, we have Power Automate, as the name implies, is for automation. And then finally, we have Copilot Studio, which is for AI features, AI chatbots, and things of that nature. So I won't spend too much time going into the Power Platform specifically because you'll see the different parts of it as we progress through today's sessions. So the presentation agenda for me this morning, we'll start with an overview of Power Apps and Power Automate. We'll go into use cases and benefits of each. The focus really would be on the demo. So we'd be demoing a model-driven app, a Canvas app, and then a Power Automate flow that generates a document that is automatically sent to a customer. And then finally, we'll open up the floor for any and all questions that you might have on anything that you see this morning. Okay, so starting with an overview of Power Apps. Power Apps is a comprehensive suite of apps that would allow you to rapidly develop any type of application to meet your unique business needs. So we have two key components of Power Apps. On the left-hand side, we have model-driven apps, which are robust applications modeled after your data, as the name implies, model-driven apps. These would be primarily used on the website or person's in-house, but they can also be used on the mobile. And then on the right-hand side, we have Canvas apps, which are fully customizable apps in terms of look, feel, function, and form that can be tailored to your business needs. And a good use case for Canvas apps would be for mobile applications, whether it be a phone or your tablet. And as mentioned, you'll see both as we go through the demo. So here we have some use cases of Power Apps. So first of all, we have customer service and ticketing. You can leverage Power Apps to create a ticketing system to track and resolve customer issues. We have inventory management to track stock levels, set alerts for low inventory, and manage and process orders. And finally, we have sales and field operations to enable sales teams or field operators to perform their duties using apps out in the field, and we'll actually be going through a field operation app in the demo today. Next, we have some benefits of using Power Apps. Of course, rapid development. Because it's low code, anybody can jump in and just start developing an app. You have Copilot and you have a wealth of resources available to you to start developing immediately. Because of the rapid development, you also get to leverage increased productivity because no one needs to spend a bunch of time learning code or some type of specialized language or some type of specialized software. So you could actually utilize your time to be more productive. Next, we have data integration and consistency. So Power Apps and all of the applications within the Microsoft Power Platform utilize the Dataverse as their central database. And because of that, the data would sync across all of the different applications, which you'll also see as we go through the Power App demo later on today. And then finally, and of course not least, there's 1,000 benefits I could go into, but we don't have 1,000 minutes. I only have a couple. It is scalable and secure. So right now you might have just this one particular use case, but as your business grows, as you see the power of Power Apps, and as your processes expand, you can scale your app upwards, and everything will of course be secure because it's built on the Microsoft Security Framework and the Microsoft Cloud. Next, we move into an overview of Power Automate. So Power Automate is a low-code, cloud-based automation platform that would help you to, of course, automate processes and enhance existing ones. Some capabilities of Power Automate, of course, automating business processes through the use of any workflows and the ability to connect to external APIs or any of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of built-in connections. And then it is also flexible as well. So you can start with a simple particular flow and expand as you move on. So So we have some use cases here of Power Automate. So we can automate approval processes. So for instance, you need approval for a document or purchase order or something of that nature, you can automate that process. So as you fill out a form, for instance, you can trigger an email which would be automatically sent to a person. They give you the approval and you're good to go. Which would lead into the second point, automated notification, where, for instance, just like I mentioned with the approval of a purchase order via email, you can get an automatic notification. When a user completes a task, for instance, you can be notified of that as well. And then last but not least, we have customer engagement, in which you can automate the creation of documents or sending personalized emails on a birthday or sending messages to your customers automatically at a scheduled time, for instance. And as we demo Power Automate later on, we'll go through actually the generation of documents automatically based on customer data. So some benefits of using Power Automate. The biggest one is reduce manual effort. Because you hear me speak so much about automation, 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 a good perfect example would actually be the demo here today, where we actually automated, well, as much as possible, we actually digitized a process that was entirely paper-based, and what would have taken maybe a couple hours, say on a day, you have a whole bunch of forms to fill out, the data is similar, you can automate it and go from hours to minutes. And so because of that reduced manual effort, you get to reap the benefits of enhanced productivity because you don't need to spend the same amount of time doing the same thing over and over and over again. So you can put your time towards more high value activity. And then finally, just like Power Apps, Power Automate is also very flexible and very scalable. So you can start with a simple process, and as your process expands and as your business grows, you can adjust your flow and update your flow over time to grow with you. So with that, I'll move into the demo now. So I'll pull up my Power App here on the screen. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so hope everybody is seeing the screen here. So this is your model-driven application. And the model-driven application, as mentioned, is based on your data. So if you look at the left-hand side here, this is called your site menu. And all of the items in your site menu actually represent a table that stores data. So right now we landed on the jobs section or the jobs table, and all of these are jobs record in there. But before I go through the job, which is the main focus of this application, I'll just give you an overview of what this application is for and the process that it supports. So this application was built to support a waste management service process. So they had sheets that they manually fill out, and they have two types of users. They have in-house users who actually create the job and then assign it to a person on the field. So that's what this application was created for here. And before I go through and you start wondering, hey, why this man talking about the BTOM or a dump, it is because it is a waste management application. So I'll go to the settings area here just to cover some of the supporting information. So as I go through further, you'll have some insight and some context as to why I'm filling out certain things and how. So starting at the bottom here, we have something called receptacles. This is what they would collect the waste in. And I just really want to show the different types of fields that you can have on a form. So starting at the top here, we have this asset ID, and this form could be entirely customizable. This was just built here for this purpose. We could have any type of field, and this is just a free text field. So on a form, you can have free text fields. Next, we have a category here. This is a drop-down field, so you can have drop-down fields as well. We have another drop-down here. And then you can also actually attach photos to the record as a field on the form. So you can see here we have a photo attached to this record. And in addition to that, you can actually secure your fields or implement some type of validation on the field. If you notice, some of the fields have a red asterisk and some don't. That red asterisk on your form would indicate that it is required and you actually cannot create a record without entering that information. Next here we have some disposal sites, just some more records. As you would notice when we go through the model-driven application, the form of it and the function of it really is similar throughout. Here we have some vehicle records, and you notice we can separate out the different sections on the site menu. So we had the disposal entities under disposal, anything related to transport, for example, the vehicles and the drivers, we have them under this section here. And next I'll go back to the main area and we'll actually create a job and start moving through that process. So I'll switch back to waste management here. And then before I actually go create a job, we have the customer section here, which is pretty important. We have contacts, and a contact is a person that you would interact with at the organization. And the organization will actually be the client here. So if you notice, we have names in the contacts, but we have actual entities, organizations within the clients or the accounts. And all of this information that I just gave you is important because you'll see it utilized here when we go create a job. So here we have some existing jobs, but I'll go create a new one by going to the command bar at the top and clicking on job. When I click on job, it will open up the job form for me. And right here at the top, you notice immediately we have this blue bar at the top here with different stages in it. This is called a business process flow, and it is designed and implemented to help guide users through a process and help users over time complete the process consistently. So to actually create this job, and I do want you to take notice of this new job status at the top here, we'll click new. And this would show us all of the fields that we are required to enter to create a job. So at the very top here, we have the subject. And as I mentioned beforehand, we have the red asterisk. So I'll go ahead and enter subject for my job. I'll just call it waste service today. Here we utilize a drop down. As you saw, we have different field types. This one is just a yes or no, and we have a default value in there of no. And you notice this one actually isn't required. Next, we have a drop down for waste type, a drop down for units. So I'll just select bags. And this field here, when we went to the client, you saw all of the clients under there. This is a lookup field, and you can leverage lookup fields to relate one record or one entity to another. So I'll relate this record or assign this job to the Agricultural Development Bank, and the driver, I'll assign it to the admin because I'll be acting as both the in-house user and the driver. And I'll let you know when I juggle those two hats across so you can understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Next, we need to link it to a vehicle, a disposal site, and we need to set a schedule date, which is another type of field you could have in there. You can also have date pickers. So I'll set the date as today. Once I enter all of the information required from me at this stage, I can go ahead and click save. So a couple minutes ago, I did ask you to pay attention to the new job status. You see when we created the job, it's no longer a new job, but the job that we just created based on the subject that we entered. Next, I'd like to point you to the job status. As we just created this job, the job status is new. But you'll see once we push this job to the next stage, which is the collection stage, the status will change to active, meaning that the job is ready to go and can be handed off over to the field operator. So we pushed it over to the collection stage here. And I'll just refresh. And you'll see the job status change to active. That was actually a Power Automate flow in the background, updating this job status based on a user action. User action being the stage changing from new to collections. So at this point, I'll now take off my in-house hat and put on my field operator coverall and switch on over to the mobile application or the Canvas app. So I'll just refresh here and pull up the Canvas app for you. So this is the Canvas app here. So as mentioned, we have two different types of apps. We have the model-driven app, which is the one we just came from, and then the Canvas app, which is this one here. And as we mentioned earlier, Canvas apps can be fully customizable in terms of the look, the feel, the form, and the function. So this was the design that this particular app was implemented with. So we have the job that we just created, we service today, and we can go ahead and click into it. And so immediately you would see we have basically two sections within this application. At the very top, we have this section with a gray gradient at the back, and then at the bottom, we have the white gradient. The half at the top would capture all of the information that the in-house person entered that would just be for the benefit of the user on the field. So they wouldn't be entering or interacting any of this information you see at the top here. Their main point of focus and the area they would be interacting with would be the bottom half here, the time details, as they are required to enter the times and information related to the job that they perform. So I'll go ahead and fill out this job as a field user. So I'll enter start time. The time is 10:18. So I'll enter the time that we have now, 10:18 a.m. and the end time. So I suppose I'll finish within the next maybe 3 minutes with this job. So I'll just enter 10:21 as the finish time. So 10:21 a.m. Next, we did enter the units, if you remember earlier on, as bags. So we can enter a quantity collected here. So I'll just enter 5 bags. And then we also have a collection status drop down that would indicate whether the job was complete or incomplete. So I'll enter completed. And then you notice we have a section here to enter driver signature and client signature. But before I go on to those, I'd actually like to direct your attention all the way up to the top right here, where we have the sticky note icon. This sticky note icon here was for an additional feature where it would allow the users on the field to communicate on record with the person in-house by creating and attaching a note to the job record. And I'll show you how that works. So I'll go ahead and add a note here, and we enter a note title. I'll enter lack of access to compound, and I'll enter the note details. Job was completed later than expected because of lack of access. And you see, we also have the ability to attach a photo. So Canvas apps can utilize your device capabilities. So in this case, we utilize the camera function. So I'll go ahead and add a photo. And here we have the ability to actually switch between the cameras on your device. The two cameras I have connected here are these, but on your mobile device, it would be your front camera or your back camera. And then you can actually go ahead and take the picture. I believe because my camera is set up here, I cannot actually take a picture. Let me just turn off my camera from the presentation and try this again. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I'd have to move on without the camera, but I would show you that functionality with the notes regardless. So we still have the note here. So I'll just go ahead and save the note. And you see the note added, and we have the title of the note here as well as the body of the note. So next, I'll go back on over to the bottom here right before I divert it off to the notes. and I'll enter driver signature. And for the driver's signature, they actually use this with tablets and styluses, so they could sign here. So I'll just enter a rough signature, and then they also capture the client signature. So at this point, they would give the device over to the client, and the client would enter their name, and then they would do save and sign, and then the client would also sign this job form. And at this point, you can go ahead and submit this job, and your process or your part in the process as a field operator would now be complete, and the job would be handed back off to the in-house person. So going back from the Canvas app, this was the Canvas app, going back to the model-driven app now, I will refresh this app, this record, and you'd notice here the job status once again was changed. It was previously active, it's now collected and deployed, and you see all of the information that we collected here along with the signatures. So at this point, I'll approve and complete this job. You'd notice here for this approval field, we have this key here indicating that this is a secured field and only certain persons could enter information in here. Luckily for me, I do have the permission, so I can go ahead and approve this job and click on finish. And at this point, the job is complete. And you can notice here on the right-hand side, we have two pieces of information entered on the timeline. So this was the note that I entered earlier, the job, the lack of access to the compound and the job being completed later than expected. And then you would notice actually here we have another one saying that a job activity sheet was generated. So this was the work of Power Automate, and we'll get into that now. So this is what happened there that contributed to that item in the timeline. And just to give some context, the timeline tracks client communications or any type of activity related to a particular record within that space there. So this was the activity sheet that was generated based on the information that we entered. So you can see here the information, the disposal side, the times that I entered, the driver, vehicle number, etc., as well as the note that I entered, and both signatures were captured on this form. So this was done automatically in the background as we moved through the processes and automatically emailed off to this client. I didn't actually send it to the client. This is just a test version of it, sending internally. So now I'll actually walk you through that process and that Power Automate flow. So this is the Power Automate flow here. It's a Power Automate cloud flow. And you can see 2 minutes ago it was run. And so the major thing for Power Automate cloud flow is actually a trigger. You must have something to actually kick off this process. In this case, it is when the job status is changed, as you saw, through the different stages. This flow is triggered when it's changed to collected. So once it is triggered, we have some steps here where we initialize a couple variables that we'll be using later on. So we initialize a couple different types of variables, some string variables, some array variables, and you can add in all of these variables by simply dragging and dropping items into here. Next, we have a couple items here where we actually got data related to the trigger. In this case, the trigger was on the job. So we retrieved all of these pieces of information related to the job to be able to use them later on. Next, because we are dealing with times, we just wanted to make sure that the time that we captured was accurate. So we added in these time conversion steps here to just make sure that any time we captured is represented in our time, which is UTC -4. Next, just like the steps above, the get a row steps, we actually retrieve the information from the signature fields that you saw, because we can't retrieve those in exactly the same way that we would retrieve text or the information from a drop-down. We need to specifically specify it because it is a different file type. Next, we have some SharePoint connectors here. And if you remember from earlier, we do have, like I said, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of connectors that you just drag and drop and utilize. So we utilize some SharePoint connectors here to actually store that driver signature in SharePoint. So we did it for the driver signature and the client signature. Next, we had a section here called list rows, and a list rows would retrieve all of the particular records in a table with any conditions that you specified. So for instance, this list rows here related driver notes, we wanted to capture all of the notes related to this particular job and this driver. So that would be the one note that I entered within the application. Next, we had this apply to each step here, because after you retrieve all of the notes, you actually want to operate on it in some way. So here it would iterate through and operate on each one. Next, we had a switch statement here to account for different cases. So in this case, we had just one note attached it. So we went through this step here. We actually created and populated that template that you saw in the email. And we created the file from it based off of the template. Then we ran a child flow that would actually convert that Word template into a PDF and send off the email. And just as a form of cleanup, we actually deleted the Word document, and we also deleted the driver signatures as they were all captured on the PDF. So that would be it for the overview of Power Automate and Power Apps. This would be the end of my presentation, and I now invite any and all questions that you may have based on the stuff that you saw today.